Good morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always, told out of Voice of Radio. So today we've got, stop me if you've heard me say this in the past week, but we've got really big news. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen. We have really big news. I know I say that every video at the moment. It has not escaped my notice that I'm telling you in every video we've got big news. But I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, as far as I am concerned, the last 9 videos have all been legitimately big news. What do you want me to do about it? That's just the way it is. Interestingly enough, the next video, this afternoon's video, it's not necessarily big news like that, but it is extremely cool news, and I'm fairly sure I am literally the only person who can make a video about it, the only one that knows. So I've got a proper exclusive coming for you later today. How's that for a nice little tease? But the news that has come down today is the news that it has been expected. The Pokémon TCG standard format rotation has been confirmed for the Western world, outside of Japan, and actually for what it's worth, that tool errata that I told you about the other day has also been confirmed. Now, if I'm honest with you, this shouldn't be a huge surprise, because I told you this was going to happen. And when I told you this was going to happen, this isn't some kind of like amazing, stunning prediction that nobody else could have made. No, it was just the way it works. When Japan have changes like the Pokemon tool errata, we get them as well. When Japan has a rotation, we're going to have a rotation too. We knew it was going to be the same as Japan. I was off by 2 weeks on the date, kind of, which is my own silly fault. I'll explain that in a minute. So they said this. The standard format rotation for the 2023 Pokemon TCG Championship Series season will go into effect on April the 14th, 2023. During every Championship Series season, Pokemon Organized Play removes older expansions from competition in the standard format with the goal of maintaining a healthy competitive environment. This rotation challenges existing players to create new strategies and enable new players to get involved in play Pokemon events using the most recent sets. I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail about why rotation happens. This has been going on for a while, but basically, rotation keeps enemy for us. Essentially, the rotation becomes battle styles onwards. So, years 2 and 3 of the Sword and Shield TCG, that is what we've got for the rotation. And it basically means that older sets that are generally a little bit more expensive, yeah, they're gone. So what we're left with is newer sets that are less expensive, that are easier to get hold of. And I know that's not a hard and fast rule. I know sets like Evolving Skies, for instance, are becoming quite expensive because it's such a good set and it always sells out. I understand all of this, but as a general rule, this is why rotation happens, and it's why rotation's a good thing. Plus, the more sets you have in the game, the more likely it is you're going to have some unintended consequence that breaks the game. We see it expanded all the time. It's why the vast majority of bans are for expanded, not standard. So rotation does make a huge amount of sense. And as expected, rotation is going to be Regulation Mark E onwards. So any Regulation Mark D cards are going to be going away. Practically, that means that, with a couple of exceptions, we are essentially rotating out the Sword and Shield base set. We are rotating out Rebel Clash. We are rotating out Darkness Ablaze. And we are rotating out Vivid Voltage. The Pokemon TCG does very much work in years. This is year 1 of the Sword and Shield TCG. 3 sets a year, 4 sets is 1 year. This is year 1 of Sword and Shield, which is being removed. Next year, we're going to rotate out year 2 of the Sword and Shield. That is Regulation Mark E, and so on and so forth. Since we got these regulation marks, I used to do predictions for the rotation. And I'm going to be perfectly honest with you here. Since we took away the randomness and started just using regulation marks, predicting the rotation has gotten a little bit less fun. So now my rotation prediction videos are really more along the lines of what the rotation is going to look like when it hits, rather than actually predicting what the rotation is going to be, because I can already tell you that next year we are going to be rotating Regulation Mark E, and we're going to be going to Regulation Mark F onwards. It does kind of take the surprise out of it just a little bit. So, what did they say? As briefly mentioned in April 2021, cards with the D regulation mark will no longer be legal for play in the 2023 standard format. Cards with E and F regulation marks will be legal to use, as will any future regulation marks, bearing in mind by the time this comes in, regulation mark G will have been released. So, phrasing is a little bit weird. A card's legality status is no longer based on which expansion it's from. Even if a card is from a recently released expansion, players will need to refer to the regulation mark at the bottom of the card to see whether that card is legal for play. Interesting example here would be the reprint of Quick Ball that came around in Fusion Strike. Fusion Strike is the last set from year 2 of the Sword and Shield TCG. Most of the cards in that set are regulation mark E. The reprint of Quick Ball is regulation mark D, so even though it's from Fusion Strike, which is not that old a set, Quick Ball will still be rotating. New cards must still follow the appropriate waiting period to become tournament legal, which is typically 2 weeks after their release. For in-person play Pokemon events, a standard format rotation will go into effect on April the 14th. For digital play on Pokemon TCG Live, the standard format rotation will go into effect on March the 30th. This will give players an official platform to test out the new standard format before participating in any in-person events. 2 very important things from what we just said. Firstly, and this is really important, I predicted that we would see the rotation on the 30th of March because that is the release of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. That was very silly. And the reason, 31st, I predicted the 31st. And the reason that was very silly is because we always wait 2 weeks before the cards are released. So the rotation was never going to happen when Scarlet and Violet was released. The rotation was always going to happen when Scarlet and Violet became legal, which was going to be the 14th of April. So I was right in that the rotation is coming in with the release of Scarlet and Violet. Again, that was not a particularly difficult prediction. Japan is rotating when Scarlet and Violet releases. We were always going to rotate when Scarlet and Violet released. The mistake that I made was I forgot to build in the 2-week waiting period that we were inevitably going to have. So yes, we are rotating with the release of Scarlet and Violet, but it is when Scarlet and Violet becomes legal, not when it actually releases, which is the way it was always going to be, and frankly, it was a bit silly of me to think otherwise. Sorry about that one. The other really important thing to note here is specifically mentions when the rotation comes in for PTCG Live. It does not mention when the rotation comes in for the Pokemon trading card game online. Hey, maybe that's a coincidence. Maybe the person writing the copy forgot to write Pokemon TCG Online. Maybe. Probably not. Again, we don't know for certain. This is me reading between the lines here, but it is overwhelmingly likely at this stage that this basically means they're either not rotating on PTCGO, or this is when they're going to sunset PTCGO and move to PTCG Live. I don't know. But the fact that they're specifically mentioning live without mentioning online, I mean, that kind of tells you all you need to know now, doesn't it? Now, older versions of cards that don't have a regulation mark can still be used if the card is currently legal for play. So, for instance, the Rare Candy from Sun and Moon has a regulation mark D, but because Rare Candy is the same card and is still legal in the standard format, you can use the old version of Rare Candy. The rule has been for a while that the card needs to be functionally identical, even if the wording is ever so slightly different. So, for instance, Boss's Orders Giovanni is rotating out, except it's not, because the card isn't called Boss's Orders Giovanni, the card is called Boss's Orders, and we've got things like Boss's Orders Cyrus, which are legal, ergo Boss's Orders Giovanni is still legal because the card is called Boss's Orders. The card isn't called Boss's Orders Giovanni. Giovanni is very much a little subtitle that isn't part of the name. That is very important, especially because some people like Giovanni more than they like Cyrus. So now they can keep playing with Giovanni, and that's rather lovely. Expanded is not rotating. That is very important. It is still going to remain black and white onwards. Expanded hasn't been used for regionals, etc. for a little while, and Expanded very much seems to be the secondary format. It's not used for Worlds, and frankly, I can't really imagine a world in which it would be the format for Worlds, so don't go expecting that anytime soon. We're going to see more bans, essentially. We're just going to see more bans coming in. That's my prediction. And that Pokemon Tool Card errata that I showed you the other day is coming in again. Basically, tools aren't item cards anymore. Tools used to be item cards. They are now no longer item cards. They are their own category. Now, I did do a whole video about this. I'll link it in the description. But one way to look at this, if you look at a card like Irida from Astral Radiance, the supporter card, sees a huge amount of play, very relevant card. That lets you search for a water Pokemon and an item card. Well, unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, tools are no longer items, so Irida will not let you get a Pokemon tool card anymore. Whereas if you look at something like Drizzile, which is rotating out, but it's still a card everybody uses, so it's a nice example. Drizzile, when you evolve into it, lets you search a trainer card. And tools are not items, but they are still trainers. So Drizzile, you could still go and get a tool card, but Irida, you no longer are able to do so. And for instance, item lock, something like Vikavolt, will stop you playing item cards. However, Pokemon tools are no longer item cards, so they can still be played under an item lock, which is, you know, one of those things. Worth noting, Vikavolt is also Darkness Ablaze, which means it is rotating out, but it's also the most relevant item lock in the format at the moment. Hence, and actually they used it as an example on the official website, but that's why I'm using it as an example here. Oh, also, you know that Pokestop card? Pretty good card. Discards the top 3 cards of your deck. You get to put any item cards into your hand. You no longer get Pokemon tools from Pokestop. So yeah, when this comes in, tools are their own category. They're not subsections of items, even if it's still printed that way, because a lot of the older cards, well, all the older cards were. This is actually not coming in on April the 14th. This is coming in on the pre-release of Scarlet and Violet, which should be 2 weeks before the release, which means we should be looking at the weekend of the 18th and 19th of March. That should be when this comes in. So yeah, frankly, ladies and gentlemen, pretty gosh darned big news indeed. But now it's over to you guys. Tell me what you think about this. Tell me what you're going to be missing from the rotation. Tell me anything you want to tell me in the comment section. Go nuts! Be nice! And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWasi. That's where we talk Pokemon and card games and Pokemon card games and all kinds of fun things. And please do consider checking out patreon.com/PTCG Radio, where you can support the channel. You can get some bonus podcasts. You can join a Discord and chat with us about various things, Pokemon or otherwise. And you can get shout-outs on the channel like the lovely It's a Coaster, who is one of the most active members over on the Discord and is a very lovely person. So thank you very much for the support, and thank you for being a very lovely person. But by far the most important thing is always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.